I'm divorce prep coach Alex Beatty, otherwise known as the Divorce Planner, across all social media platforms and my website. I work with people in advance of a separation or a divorce, so they gather all of the administrative stuff necessary, do financial planning, identify their goals and priorities, and set them up so that they negotiate well and create their best next chapter. I'm so excited to be talking to Betsy Pake today. So this conversation we're going to have is all about being at that big crossroads in life. Should I stay or should I go? It's a really tough place to be. It's a limbo, and it requires a lot of, introspection, and it requires a lot of kind of honesty with yourself. And my guest today, Betsy Pake, she is a midlife change expert as well as the host of The Art of Living Big. It's a podcast you can find across all of your fine podcast platforms. And so with that, Betsy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I think go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm glad I slipped into your DMs one day. I saw her show up, y'all, and I was like, we need to be friends. So I think I messaged you. We need to be friends.
You did, and it was the best message, I have to say. All of a sudden I was like, oh, she's one of my people. But totally. I have to say it in a broader sense, like the people I've met in this niche on social media, the women specifically, have been so warm and welcoming, and it's been such a community. And I think the thing that is one of the common threads that brought you to this work is having gone through this experience firsthand. There's a big difference. And I don't knock anybody who's in this niche who hasn't, but there's a different level of understanding when you've navigated these waters. So with that, I'm just going to jump into my first question. And as I said, if you have a question for me or Betsy, please drop it in below. I'll try to get to it as soon as possible. So look, this is your area of expertise, right? You've worked with so many people, so many women stuck in that should I stay or should I go limbo, which can last for years. And there's no shame in that. It's a normal part of the process. But, when we stay stuck, what are you finding are like the hidden emotional toll that it takes, that indecision when you kind of let it drag out or ignore it?
Yeah. I think that moment of indecision can last for some people for a couple of months and can last for some people for 30 years. And I think, like you said, it is so individual. But I believe, and I really call it a purgatory, right? It's more than limbo. It is like a purgatory of everything feels on fire. And I think that the longer you stay is the better you are at ignoring the truth. And the truth is that it's not just one thing. The truth is that it's not just your relationship. When you're in a relationship that isn't feeding you, that doesn't feel good, and you're constantly having to sweep things under the rug or gaslight yourself into pretending that it's okay, it starts to impact everything. And, when I talk with women, I'll ask them so many times, I'll say, like, have you noticed this impacting your career yet? And they'll say, oh, no, I'm so good. Like, that's where I get my joy. And I believe them. But also, I know that if they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller in their relationship, I promise you, there are times when they could show up in a meeting and they don't show up because they're emotionally and energetically drained. There are times where they are showing their kids what it's like to sweep things under the rug and ignore things and at the detriment of yourself. And they don't recognize that all of these things are repercussions of avoiding the truth, and they're doing their best. I know that they're doing it from a place of trying to maintain their life. And it takes bravery, it takes a lot of bravery to say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I really want to look at how this is impacting my life and what this is really costing me.
I think that there are two things that you brought up that really kind of resonated with me. First is this idea of being in this position is a kind of a purgatory. I think that is absolutely, you're right. That is the right kind of definition for it because as you said, you shrink yourself. You're compartmentalizing, which is a survival tactic. Mm-hmm. Like even the most amicable of situations, you can't help but do that. You're shut down in certain areas, juggling a family and a career on top of it, or just a career, anything else. And then you're not fully kind of, living big in your relationship area, or at least living honestly, then yes, you're right. I'm sure there's been a ripple. It can't help but have a ripple effect through the rest of your life. And by the way, you might see it manifesting in physical pain, because when you're not listening to that inner guide of this doesn't feel right, and then you don't act on it, it's going to get loud, as you said, in other
Yeah.
areas. I think that's 100%
And if
true. So
you think about things as like energetically, like I only have so much energy, right, for the day. And if I'm putting a lot of it into coping and avoiding and, trying to maintain this, I don't have energy for the hobbies or the friendships or that phone call that a friend wants to have. Like I'm drained and I just don't have. And what we say is, I'm just so busy. And a lot of that is just the emotional drain of this. Energetically, you're not even recognizing, you know. One thing I want to add, before we move on from this is, and I say this a lot to my ladies, but our brains are designed to keep us in the same spot, right? Because we're alive. So our unconscious mind doesn't know that we're miserable or even a little unhappy. It doesn't know, but it knows you're alive. And so it's going to be working to keep you there. So this is why I say it's such an act of bravery and resourcefulness to do something different, because you have to overcome this biological need to stay the same. And that's how come when I talk to women, and sometimes I talk to women that have been miserable for 40 years, and I think, like, God love you, your brain works so well. Do you know what I mean? Because it's kept you alive in this whole thing. And then to think, how can I be resourceful? Where do I need to show up for myself today? Can be a really important question in all of that.
so true and so helpful. And I love that you framed it as being a part of, look, you are working against like a cognitive bias that we have, right? Like it's easy to get stuck. So thinking about like, okay, well, maybe I should get divorced can bring up a lot of these like scary ideas, because your brain's trying to trick you into just status
Stay.
quo.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that you're right. It is an old leftover survival tactic, like from that you have to learn how to recreate that narrative. So, I mean, I think that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is like, let's kind of like talk about the difference between intuition versus denial, right? Like, how can somebody tell the difference between kind of what's a normal marriage struggle and what's a genuine sign it might be time for deep introspection and to move on?
Yeah. Yeah. Years ago, I had this dog that I loved. It was my soul dog. And she passed away. And when it was about time. You kind of get close and you're like, I know it's about time, but I love her so much. I don't want her to go. And I went to the vet and I said, I need you to help me to navigate this. Like, how do I know when it's time? And she said, you're going to look back on a week and you're going to notice if she had more good days than bad days. You're going to notice if there were more struggles or more joy. And I think of that so often in this, like, how do I know? Well, look back. At the end of the day, ask yourself, was today full of more struggle or was it more joy? At the end of the week, at the end of every given month, how was this? How do I feel about this? And I think there's so many things we can do to begin to change things. And we can talk about that a little bit if you want. But I think that knowing is really having some reflection on what's real. And I think when we're in it, when we're in the moment, we're like, it's fine. It's just what I do. Don't worry about it. I don't mind. But then when we can stop and reflect at those kind of set points and say, overarching, does it feel better or does it feel worse? And then what's my next step that I need to do?
Uh, Practical step. I mean, and it's a
Mhm.
there, and sometimes just being in a position to actually have that conversation with yourself, that's the win that you celebrate. Like,
Yeah.
been locked in kind of a long-term dynamic that hasn't been working, but you're in that survival mode of like, my life is really busy, I got to keep going, something's not off, but I just don't have the capacity. Getting real honest, right, can be a hard step. But that's a victory. I love that. And a lot of times also you can have societal pressures or familial pressures or just self-inflicted things just kind of weigh in on how you're living your life. And I see it all the time, right? Especially when, because, I work primarily with people during divorce and there can be shame attached, but it's usually coming from another place.
Mhm.
Like people making a decision on what others might think to kind of stay in a certain space isn't living for yourself. So how do you help somebody tune out that kind of external voice or that idea or narrative that doesn't really serve them and truly connect with what they actually want?
Yeah. I think what you said is so true. What I hear so often is like, I need to wait until after spring break. Like, we already have something set up for spring break, or I need to wait until after graduation, or so and so is going to go to college next year. I just have one more year. And I think all of that is really valid. Like, and as moms, we do the very best that we can with what we have in front of us and what our internal resources allow us to do, right? So I have a lot of respect for everybody with whatever choice they make at whatever point that it is. And I think to just remember that the way that I'm acting is a pattern. It's a pattern in itself. And it's not a pattern that we just got this past week. It's a pattern that was born probably over years and years, and probably something we were taught as little kids, right? Just don't make a big deal, don't make a fuss. And I know for me, I'm in my 50s, so I know like when I was growing up, right? The 50s are the bestest. I know when I was growing up, like we were kind of taught to just like make it okay for everybody else. Don't make a fuss, don't worry about it. And so I think to remember that this is a pattern. And so it's going to take a process to undo that pattern. And I am a big fan of starting really small with things. Like we don't have to start like if somebody calls me and they're like, I'm unhappy, I wouldn't say you should leave. Like, first of all, it's never up to me if you should leave or not. I love it when people stay and I love it when people go, whatever they decide. But what I always say is like, start with the very smallest thing that you can do. And sometimes that's like, I'm going to start making the choices that I can, that will impact me, and I will feel like they don't impact everyone else too greatly. So everybody's having chicken for dinner, and I always make chicken, and I love chicken with mushrooms, and nobody likes mushrooms, but I'm going to make it with the mushrooms anyway because I like it. So I'm making a choice for me, right? They can pick the mushrooms off or whatever it is you do. But I think starting to make those little choices to remind yourself that I'm important and the part of this that is my life is important, that I have a whole existence. I say to my daughter sometime, like, I'm just a girl. It's my first time here. But to remember that it's our first time and we're doing the best we can. And if we can start to make choices, little choices for ourselves, I'm going to give you another example. Sometimes when I'm driving with my daughter, um, who's 23, but she lives near me and we do a lot of things together. And there is a grocery store and a Target and a shopping center we go to that is a straight shot down the road. Sometimes when we go, I'm going to take a right and go this way. And she'll be like, it's straight down the street. Like, just go down the street. And I'm like, no, because I want to turn right. There's 500 different ways I could maneuver my way to that store, but I want to make a choice for me. And that sounds so silly, but it starts to retrain things. A couple weeks ago, I went to the Bahamas by myself. I just wanted to go get some sun. And I was like, I'm just going to go. And so I went, and I was to go on a Friday. I left on a Friday and I came home. I was to come home on a Tuesday. But on Sunday night, I was like, I think I'm done. Like, I'm done. And then I thought, I got one more day. And then I thought, I want to go just because I want to, because I want to train my brain that I get to
Mm.
choose. And so I did. I changed my plane flight and I left the next day, and it was great. I had time to do laundry and all that before I came back to work. But I got to pick. And that I think is really important because in all of this, women start to lose the perception even that they have so many choices.
Yes, I think that's so true. And I love that you are, kind of articulating the fact that this is a process, celebrate the small wins,
Yeah.
And by, it's really easy to get locked into those patterns. You using the example of driving to Target with your daughters is perfect in that. Like we always go a certain way.
Yeah.
And when you shift, when you open yourself up with curiosity, when you're leading with curiosity, it's
Yeah.
always bring back some honesty, and it's going to bring back energy and
Mhm.
open you up to new things. And that's a part of this entire process of should I stay or should I go, should I have a divorce, is you have to be really open, because we know you're at this point because something is not working.
Yeah.
Fundamentally not working in your life, and you can no longer ignore it. And so guess what? You can't go back.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. The whole point of life is actually change. I think we've
Mm.
been kind of brainwashed a little bit to like, oh, I hate change, I fear change. Life is change.
I
And
love that. Yeah.
yeah, and your experience of life is learning how to navigate that
Mhm.
change.
Yeah.
We are a boat on the water, and there are going to be waves. Know that there are waves and you're going to get through them. It's just about being open, be curious. What is this wave? What does it mean for me? What do I want?
Yeah.
And to get swept under, right? And then what happens is then, as you talk about all the time, you start to live small. You're
Mhm.
not fully living. And I say
Yeah.
to clients all the time, we have one go round.
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
so So, no matter where you are in that dynamic in your relationship, the goal at the end is the same:
Yeah.
to have people living their
Mhm.
lives,
Yeah.
you know, and reclaiming your responsibility to yourself. I'm telling you, it's such a profound energy shift that I see when I'm working with clients during the process of
Yeah.
kind of rediscovering yourself. It is a beautiful, energizing thing.
Yeah.
It changes the trajectory of your life so that you're more in line with something that feels deeply authentic to
Yeah.
you. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the most alive periods of my life was deciding a separation and divorce was next. Like
Hmm.
music sounded better. I'm serious. Like
Yeah.
these were alive. And being able to then to like, even as a part of that process, as you're deciding what should I do, the other question is, who am I?
Hmm.
Who am I now? I know who I
Yeah.
was then.
Yeah.
And
And we have a vision of what our lives are going to look like. And so we've got to grieve that vision. And the cool thing is we get to create a new vision, you know? And I think that can be really powerful to help us feel a little more in control.
I agree. And that idea of control goes hand in hand with fear. Fear plays such a huge role in keeping people stuck in a myriad of ways. So, when you're working with clients, like what mindset shifts have you seen that create a real breakthrough for clients who might be paralyzed
Yeah.
in this? Like we're talking about that small step,
Yeah.
you know, what those look
Yeah.
like.
You know, I think in a really important piece to remember is that, and I'm going to say it this way, and bear with me, but that it's all a story. It's all just a story, and it depends on what story you're telling yourself. And I don't care if it's real. Like, I don't care if like it's so real to you, like you were taught this as a kid and you're like, that is true, but that is true, that is reality. I don't care if it doesn't serve you. If it doesn't serve you, let's evaluate it. Let's see if it's believable. It's not the thing. Years ago, I remember I saw an interview with Dr. Wayne Dyer,
Mhm.
and he was saying that he was giving a speech one day, and that when he would give a speech, he would never watch the news or TV or anything before because he wanted all his energy to be able to give the speech. And the speech was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And when he got up to give the speech, he was about to walk up, and everybody in the audience was just like beside themselves. And so many people were crying. And he was like, what's been happening? And they said a plane has flown into the towers in New York City. And he got up and talked. And the thing he said was, it wasn't, we can all agree that's a horrific thing, but I didn't know about it. And so I didn't feel bad. It was the story about it being a horrific thing that made it bad. because there were some people in the world that didn't think it was a horrific thing. So it's about how you're
Mm-hmm.
perceiving it. So all of the things can be happening and they can be bad. Absolutely. And you can say, this thing happened and it's bad. I'm going to take it and I'm going to use it as a mirror to help me evaluate what's going on inside me so that I can heal from it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'll never replay this with anybody else in my life ever. And I can move on in a different way. So I have a process I called mirror, mend, or move, where everything that happens that causes something to go on inside you, you pause and you use it as material to say, what is happening? And is this something that I can heal from so that I could experience this marriage differently? Like that's possible. And if it's not possible, like if the marriage is dead and it's time for me to send them to you, then I think it's really important to be able to still be healed from that so that you don't carry it along to somebody
Yeah.
else. So yeah, so I think this is so important to just understand that there is a mindset that is creating your perception of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that perception is everything. And I love that because being able to challenge the
Mhm.
narrative, right, helps you see the
Yeah.
pattern. And I love that saying is sometimes those challenges, what feels like is something just so bad that's happening to you, is really a redirection. It's just about
Yeah.
reframing that when you I can just say from personal experience, when I am following a path that isn't in alignment with my values or my intentions,
Yeah.
I come up against roadblocks, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
part of not listening, it's like things aren't working in a certain way because I'm not really being honest with myself or listening, or I haven't dealt with something like
Yeah.
fundamental, something else that you brought up, which is absolutely a part of the process. If you're at this crossroads, which is, okay, why am I here? What is going on communication wise with
Yeah.
myself? And really, and obviously in the dynamic with my partner, but also it's going to bring up any underlying pre-existing,
Yeah.
as mentioned, experience that kind of set you in this way. It's going to force you
Mhm.
to deal with it. And if you don't, if you continue to kind of push down, the origin story, as you said, you're going to bring it into the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, our nervous systems are typically adapted to that kind of relationship. So even if we cognitively think, like, I don't want that ever again, you'll be attracted to it. You won't be attracted to the healthy partner. That's why we see this replay. That's why I have replayed
Yeah,
it. You know what I mean? Until I could heal it, I had to learn the hard way, and I think that's why the work I do is so important to me
I
now. Yeah.
love that it passionate personal place for you because it's same. And I did the same damn thing. I was like, did not marry my dad, married my dad.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yes, totally.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
so I will say that, a marriage can end at any point if you've got married, young, if you've gotten married older, but like
Mhm.
making a decision in midlife kind of feels a little different, right? There's so much
Yeah.
history that you can have with somebody, entanglement. You kind of grew up together in a way. How does the decision process change when you're considering divorce, like after 40 versus if you're in your 20s or your 30s? Or is there a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think the healing of what's going on inside you is important no matter what.
Mhm.
But I do think that when you get divorced and it's later, now I'm open to being wrong if anybody is listening and they're like, I don't agree with that. That's fine. For me, my experience was getting divorced early 30s, I figured I'd probably find a partner and I'd probably grow old with somebody. Getting divorced in my 50s made me realize I was also making a decision to possibly be alone. And I think there's a grieving process regardless, but I think it's different. I think it's how, like the idea of how I would live my life, I think I grew up in New England and I always had like the father of the bride, like that house, and like when my kid would get married, and we'd all like I had to redo all of that in my head and say, who am I in the story? And if I was the main character in that story, how does she move forward? And I think that looks different when you're a little bit older because the story, the timeline is much different. I think forgiving yourself and also grieving that that timeline is super important.
I completely, my head was about to like pop off my neck. I was nodding so much because I agree with you. It's about being able to also, it's so easy for you to want to say, I can't believe I made this decision. Why did it? No, 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 no. Go
Yeah.
back and love on the younger version of yourself who made that decision. Number one, you couldn't be where you are today without her,
Yeah.
right? So she deserves some love because she also did the best she could with the
The
information she had,
best she could. Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and
and and she may have been interpreting the signs differently. Like now you would know if somebody said, you know, you deserve to be in the kitchen. Like now I would know that's a red flag. They may have some a different view of the world than me, and that might not align with me. But you know, if it happened 15 years ago, I might be like, well, whatever. I, you know, if you don't know. So
yeah.
I do think there is that forgiving yourself, forgiving that younger version of yourself. She was doing her best. She wanted to be loved, right? And she wanted the fairy tale. And so I think that impacts us a
And I
lot.
also love that you need to give yourself permission to allow, you know, what you want out of life to change. That's growth. And sometimes you grow, you know, in you're able to grow as an individual within a relationship, and sometimes a relationship run its specific dynamic runs its course,
Yeah.
but it's still about, I should be growing. And again, as I said, like, you know, when I count now how many healthy summers I have left, you have to get a little greedy
Mm,
time, you know,
totally.
and really clear about what you want because this isn't infinite.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the biggest and most important relationship you will ever have will be with yourself. Now, when I
Yeah.
heard things like that, when I was in my 20s, when I was in my 30s, I interpreted it in a very different way
Right.
because I was still personally looking through a lens of a lot of old baggage that I was bringing through and thinking, well, that just sounds really selfish. It's not. It's about healthy boundaries. It's about reclaiming your time. And it's about really, again, being able to authentically, you know, step into the version of your existence that feels aligned with your values and your intention. Now, I know
Yeah.
we've blown through my normal 20-minute conversations. Way to go for being so
I
engaging.
know.
So I just going to kind of wrap it up with one more question. If anybody, thanks by the way for hanging with us for this long. If anybody has anything they want to say, speak now. But I'm just going to say, in terms of kind of closing things up, you know, for someone who's feeling completely confused at this point in their relationship and their marriage right now, like what's an exercise, maybe it's a journaling prompt or a reflection practice that you found that consistently helps people cut through maybe their, you know, block to
Mhm.
get to a point where it starts the process of kind of loosening things up to really make a decision.
Yeah. First of all, when I'm in group and anybody says I'm confused, I always go, yay. And they always look at me like, what are you? But when we're confused, that means anything is possible, right? And it means I'm learning. I'm doing something different. If I wasn't confused, I would exactly know what to do. So, yay for confusion. Something that I do, I mean, I swear I do this almost every single day, is I visit a version of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that version of me is, I don't know, 94, depending on how bad my day is. Sometimes I'm like, maybe she's 92. She might not make it to 94, but she is like sitting in her bed and her all her friends are around her and her family and she's about to end her, you know, her life is about to end. And I ask her, what would you do? What would you wish I had done right now?
Mm-hmm.
How would you have me do this? If you, 94-year-old version of me, have lived a life that you love and that you are so proud of, what did I do right now? And we have all that wisdom inside of us. We really do. It's just so overdone with everybody else's expectations and thoughts and desires and needs and everything we think we're supposed to do. But if you can get in touch with that version of you, you know, she's a wise old woman and she knows the way to happiness.
Trust yourself, trust your intuition,
Yeah.
listen to that And it's never a brick wall that you run smack right into. It is like this germ of a, wait, did I hear an idea
Mhm.
or a voice? Does something kind of feel a certain way?
Yeah.
Just curious, ask the next question, keep going.
And
Betsy,
my 94-year-old version of me wears the best like kimonos and things. I'm always impressed.
all those like vintage
She's
Notori, like
she's very
dressing
cool.
gowns, totally. There's like the classy Mrs. Roper for
Yes.
people who get, yes, totally. Or Auntie Jane or whoever it might be.
Yes.
Well, Betsy Pake, you're my, new favorite friend here that I've gotten to make. Thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you so much for having really important conversation and normalizing it. Like this
Yeah.
isn't like I'm in a weird spot, because this whole process can really feel isolating. So by having these kind of conversations, I know that we're going to change the way somebody's thinking about something
Yeah.
today. And so I really thank you for your time and your expertise. My
Yeah,
guest
thanks for having me.
has been Betsy Pake. She is a midlife change expert as well as the host of the podcast, The Art of Living Big. She'll be tagged, and I'll see you hopefully again soon, Betsy. I'd love to
Yeah.
continue the
All right.
conversation.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Be well, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.